It is an honor to introduce Elana Simon, who in my estimation is one of the most remarkable young people in the world today. Elana is a senior at the Dalton School here in New York. She is an outstanding student, as well as a dancer, an aerial acrobat. In the fall, she'll be a freshman at Harvard University. These are impressive accomplishments in her own right, but they are only part of Elana Simon's extraordinary story. At the age of 12, Elana was diagnosed with a rare type of liver cancer known as fibrolamellar carcinoma after months of pain and discomfort in her abdomen. If not discovered early, this cancer is usually fatal. Elana was fortunate on 2 counts, though. Her cancer was diagnosed early, and her father, Sandy Simon, is a leading cancer biologist at Rockefeller University. Those of you who attended the 2012 Sohn conference will remember that Sandy Simon was one of our speakers. The Sohn Foundation funds the advanced technology that Professor Simon and others at Rockefeller use to research pediatric cancer. You will likely remember these moving parts of his speech as he explained how the technology the foundation provided to research his daughter's cancer.
A third vignette, this one on pediatric cancer, and involves research that depends upon equipment provided by the Sohn Foundation. 4 years ago this month, a 12-year-old girl presented with abdominal pains was found to have a tumor the size of a grapefruit in her liver. I would especially like to thank the Sohn Foundation for providing the funds for assembling the microscopes we are using. At a time when government funding restricts the purchase of capital equipment, the Sohn Foundation has stepped in. I am pleased to let you know that the girl is now 16, actively performing in dance groups, performing in musicals, and working 1 day a week in a cancer research lab. She's doing well. I should know. She's my daughter.
While Elana survived, she was burdened with the question of why she survived, and others who were just like her did not. She watched in agony as friends succumbed to the disease. So a year after Professor Simon spoke to you, Elana took the bold step of studying genetics of her own cancer, working as part of a collaborative team led by her father at Rockefeller University. Elana and her father's research team discovered a genetic mutation common to all sufferers of her particular liver cancer. The results were so significant that they were published in one of the premier medical journals. Most scientists dream of a discovery like this. Elana accomplished this at the age of 18. Elana's trailblazing work has been widely covered in the press and on television, and I know that we're all looking forward to hearing this courageous survivor and cancer researcher speak to you. Elana Simon.
Hi, I'm Elana Simon. I'm 18 years old and a survivor of a rare pediatric liver cancer called fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma. It's a mouthful, I know. My story starts 6 years ago. So when I was younger, I constantly felt these abdominal pains, and no matter how many doctors I saw, nobody could explain what was causing them. At first I thought maybe it's lactose intolerance, maybe it's appendicitis. They even said, oh, you're 12, you're a girl, it's probably just some stress, don't worry about it. Ultimately, they realized it was cancer. And as counterintuitive as it sounds, I was actually pretty relieved to get this diagnosis, even though, being told you have cancer is probably worst case scenario diagnosis. It was just very nice to finally know what it was that had been causing this pain. You always think, oh, doctors have the cure to everything. You just go to the doctor, they do their medicinal magic, and they tell you what your problem is and how to fix it. But repeatedly, that was not the case for me. So finally, I had a name. I had some kind of explanation for what it was that was causing this. So my first reaction was to go online and try to find out everything I could about this fibrolamellar. I could barely pronounce it, let alone understand what it was. So, I looked around on the internet, and the more I found, the less encouraged I was. I found out that people didn't really know much about it. No one seemed to know what was causing it, what to do with it. There was no chemotherapy for it. Really, you just have to catch it early and hope that you can get it all out through surgery. And it just seemed like no one cared about it, which was terrifying because they should care. There I was, leaving all my friends leaving school to just sit in a hospital bed and go through surgery. That's something I thought people should care about. And thankfully I was lucky in that they caught it early, and through surgery, it was all removed and I've been fine. But once I was, back out of the hospital, trying to get back on my feet, I wanted to forget all of it. It was just this bad experience that I needed to just get rid of, except I had this giant scar that went all across my torso and this giant aggressive J shape that was a constant reminder of my ordeal that just marked me as weird, weak, different, which, as a preteen just trying to get through 6th grade is the last thing one would want. So obviously I went to the drugstores and tried to buy all the scar removal tape I could find to just look normal, go back to the way things had been. But as I realized over the next couple months, getting rid of the scar, getting rid of this experience was not quite as easy as I would have imagined. When I was in the hospital, they signed me up to this organization called Ormer, where they have this summer camp where each year for 2 weeks, a whole bunch of young Jewish cancer survivors or even people still battling cancer go, and they stay together for 2 weeks at this camp. And it wasn't what I was expected, but it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. I met all these incredible young kids who had gone through so much, and instead of being embarrassed or ashamed or scared, they were all so proud. I remember one of the first nights, all of these girls were sitting around in a circle and comparing their scars and talking about the different wigs they'd tried on and saying, oh, you have a cool scar on your arm, I have a matching one too, and they were all so proud. And it made me totally change around my perspective on, having had cancer. Instead of seeing my scar as a sign of weakness, I kind of started thinking of it as my own little Harry Potter scar, a sign that I'd faced cancer, but I kicked ass. And that was awesome. I actually used to tell people when they saw my scar, I used to say it was a shark bite. It actually looks like one. It's just a giant shark's mouth shape. Because I always found it weird that, when people first find out that you had cancer, because they ask what your scar is from, if you say you have cancer, every time everyone puts on the pity face. You get the whole pity spiel of, oh, I'm so sorry. And then people start treating you differently and feeling bad for you. And it's just weird because as I learned from these girls at Camp Simcha, I was incredibly lucky. I didn't have to go through chemotherapy. I haven't had any recurrences. I've been totally fine. It was a relatively easy experience. I don't know why I need to have people pitying me. If anyone, it should be the girls who are, still fighting, the people who are still there in the hospital. When I was in the hospital, I shared a room with this 9-year-old, and I remember every day I would just hear her throwing up from her chemotherapy, and it was terrifying. So who am I to, be receiving all this pity from people? I've been doing so well, but people don't understand that, and why should they? You don't understand that until you actually go through something like this, which most kids should not be doing. But Camp Simcha just made me realize how incredibly fortunate I was, and I wish I could have shared that luck with other people, with my friends who are, still fighting cancer. So fast forward a couple years, and I've always been pretty interested in science. My dad's a scientist, and I wanted to see if science was something I could actually pursue myself. So I didn't want to work in my dad's lab at first because, what 16-year-old girl wants to spend all her time with her dad? I wanted to go off, be my own independent scientist. I thought it was super cool, so I didn't actually tell him at first. But I got an internship through a teacher at my school at this lab in New York City where they were studying pancreatic cancer, because I was still really interested in cancer. Even if I didn't want to work with him, I wanted to study cancer in some respect. And so I'd had experience in computer science through classes at school, so I was working on this computer project where they had me download from online these giant files of the DNA sequences of people with pancreatic cancer. So I was looking at their tumors and their normal cells and trying to figure out what the main differences were, what could be causing these tumor cells to become tumorous. And well, the first thing I realized is that a project like this, which is called genetic sequencing, would be perfect for fibrolamellar, because you don't have to have a base understanding of the disease to do this. It just helps you characterize this disease and understand what happens when these cells become tumorous and what could potentially cause it. And furthermore, fibrolamellar typically occurs in adolescence, and so this would actually be helpful for genetic sequencing, because in a given adult, you'll have 3,000 to 5,000 mutations in your regular cells just because they've been randomly mutating over time. plus your tumor cells are going to have even more mutations in them. And most people who have cancer are much older than I am, and so they'll have many more mutations in their cells. So if you study an adolescent cancer like fibrolamellar, wouldn't it make sense that they'll have less background mutations, so it'll be easier to find that one driver mutation that could be potentially causing this cancer? But I didn't really know how to go about starting some kind of project like this. So I talked to my surgeon, Dr. Michael Aqualia from Memorial Sloan Kettering, at just a regular checkup. And he's always said, since basically forever, that one day I'll be a surgeon or a doctor or a researcher or something. So I said, I have this idea, but what do I do? And he was just extremely encouraging, and he actually said that he would let me use some of his surgical fellows as mentors, and he would provide the samples, because I needed samples to sequence. And then through his help, and my father gave me space at his lab, and he's been helping out with anything I need, within a year, we got the samples, we got IRB approval, and I was able to start looking through this data and trying to understand this disease. Because most people who do research are more likely to, go after the big cancers, breast cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, cancers that affect way more people. But for rare diseases like fibrolamellar, most people haven't heard of it, and why would they want to go study it when it doesn't affect that many people? So it's really got to be the patients for these rare diseases who actually advocate for themselves and try to make some kind of progress on this disease, because they're the ones who care about it. So within a year, I started working on this. Actually, the project started probably a couple months after my dad presented here. And so what we ended up finding was this one mutation in every single patient I've examined, and it's this deletion in one of the chromosomes where you end up getting two genes that are typically pretty far apart coming together and forming this one mutated gene that then goes and it makes this protein that turns on tons of other things and actually causes this cancer. And since then, this work was published in Science back in February, and since it was published, researchers around the world, tons of hospitals, have actually checked their patients with fibrolamellar, and they've all found this mutation in every single patient examined, which strongly leads to suggest that this is what's causing the cancer. And this is incredible because now we actually have some kind of understanding of this disease, and you can use this to then go and develop a diagnostic to see if people actually have this cancer, because getting it early is really the key. And you can try to create a treatment for it. And it's great because since this has come out, it's gotten a lot of media attention. And I've had patients from around the world reach out to me saying, I was just diagnosed with fibrolamellar, or people even with other diseases have reached out to me and said, I was terrified when I first was diagnosed, but this is giving me hope. People are actually making progress on this disease. There actually is reason to believe that in the near future, I could have some cure, and that's incredible. And it's really great because the next steps are, we've already started working on a blood test for a diagnostic and potential therapeutics. And so that kind of leads to why I'm here at the Sohn Investment Conference. So 2 years ago, my father spoke here, and the Sohn Foundation was incredibly generous and invested in Rockefeller by giving his lab these special microscopes. And we actually used these microscopes to examine the cells of this tumor. And as you can see here, these are images from the microscope where this mutation that's causing the cancer, this chimera protein, it's highlighted in a green fluorescence. And you can see that in the tumor tissue, it's extremely bright, but this mutated protein is not present at all in the normal tissue. And none of this would have been possible to check to see if these samples have it without these microscopes. And now we're working on a simple blood test and designing 2 clinical trials for drugs that will target and hopefully cure fibrolamellar, which we're hoping to get going pretty soon. And none of this would have been possible without the Sohn Foundation's generous investments. And so exciting as these projects are, the truth is that neither of these can happen without your help. We just don't have the money to fund these, which is why I'm here today. So the Sohn Investment Conference has generously offered to give all of the money that you donate to pledge right now to the phone number on the screen directly to Rockefeller to support the work I've just described. You can also text a pledge your number listed on the donor cards or fill out the donor cards. And I know I speak on behalf of all the patients struggling with fibrolamellar or any other rare diseases who are just desperately hoping to see these 2 projects move forward. When I thank you so much in advance for generously donating. And this isn't only exciting for fibrolamellar, but people often find that when you identify a mutation that causes one kind of cancer, it's actually prevalent in other kinds of cancers too. There are tons of known oncogenes, and we've now discovered a new one. So this mutated protein that's causing fibrolamellar could actually, in turn, affect tons of other kinds of cancers too. So this could actually help many more patients than just the small fibrolamellar community. So your support has both raised the profile of pediatric cancer and rare cancer research, and will very well make a huge difference in fighting this terrible cancer. So to all of you in this room right now, you have the power to make a difference and make this research happen, and I hope you do. Thank you very much.